This video is sponsored by Perfect Circuit.
So fair warning, this video is going to be a bunch of talking because it is about the planning phase of a modular synth. So we'll get to the fun stuff later on, but this is the foundational part so that what you end up with isn't just a whole case full of oscillators. This topic has been a long time in the works. If you've watched any of the other videos on this channel, you'll know that I'm a nerd for synthesizers and drum machines and producing music and learning stuff and gadgets and tech and all that kind of stuff. Anything that has to do with producing electronic music. But there's been one corner of the electronic music world that I have avoided for years and years, and that is modular synthesizers. Now, I think there's probably a lot of reasons for that, not the least of which was total fear of everything that was modular. It looks terrifying, it looks complicated, and you just hear horror stories about bottomless pits of spending money and changing out gear and things like that. And I know myself, and I know that once I get interested in something, particularly where the worlds of music and technology converge, I know that I will fall so deep down that rabbit hole that you will probably never find me. So I put this off for a long time, but just recently I saw some videos, I spoke with some friends who were really into modular, and it really piqued my interest to the point where I decided to cast off all of the apprehension and dive right in and actually learn about it and see what it is and see what everything is about with modular. So this is going to be the first in a series of 4 videos that are going to be about my journey of diving deep into modular synthesizers. I think what'll be interesting about this whole series of videos is that I'm coming at it from the perspective of somebody who knows synthesizers already, at least a bit about them, who knows a bit about producing music and a bit about what makes sounds happen and all of that stuff. I've been working a lot on developing different combinations of equipment for live performance. So I'm not coming at this from a total beginner's perspective, but I am a total beginner where modular synthesizers are concerned. I've been learning a lot recently. I've reached out to a bunch of friends and fellow YouTubers, try and figure out what is exactly the part of modular that is right for me and how I can build that system so that it'll be something that I can use for the kind of music that I love to make and the way that I love to make it. So when I reached out to the people that I know in the modular synthesizer world and asked kind of where do you begin with everything and all the craziness that there is, the first thing that came out of pretty much everyone's mouth was, what do you want it to do? I'd never really thought about that before. You buy a synthesizer, you buy a groove box, and you're like, okay, well, I want this to make noise. I want this to, be something that I can play. I want so that when I push a key, a note comes out. But I never really thought deeper into it, like really what do I want it to do? And with all of the choices and options that there are out there with modular, you actually get to pick and choose what you actually want this machine to do. So I went back and I started to write down what were some of the things that I wanted from this machine in the end. And I broke that down into some categories so that maybe I can help you if you're thinking about going down this path with making some of these choices that will kind of drive all of the decisions that you make, and ultimately it will drive what your modular synthesizer looks like in the end. So the first thing I looked at was, do I want this to be a standalone machine or do I want it to play with others? Meaning, will it connect to other hardware? Will it connect to a DAW? Will it connect to other modular synthesizers? Do I want to play with other people and be able to sync together? Do I want it to be able to connect with the other hardware that I have here in my studio? All of those things, all of those questions can really only be answered by you for your unique situation. But it is important to really first and foremost think about, do you want this to be a standalone or do you want it to play with others? And if so, which others? The next question that comes after that and is an extension of that is, will this be sequenced or played internally or externally? So will you have an internal sequencer that's part of your modular synthesizer? Or will you be playing it with an external piece of gear? Will you be sequencing it with a a Beat Step Pro, with a Deluge, with something else. So again, this drives a lot of the decisions that get made in this process, internal versus external sequencing. Next up, we have sounds. Depending on the type of music that you make and the type of music that you want to make with your modular synthesizer, that's going to drive a lot of the decisions about which modules you choose. Every oscillator is different, just like every synthesizer sounds a bit different. Some are better suited to certain genres of music. So are you going to be making, industrial, dark, underground techno? Are you going to be making disco house? Do you want to do ambient music? Do you want to do super chill out, atmospheric, droning music? Whatever you're going to do is going to drive the decision about your sound sources, about your synth voices and your oscillators. While you're thinking about those, you're going to want to think about, do I want monophonic versus polyphonic voices? Do I want things that are digital versus analog versus wavetable? What combination of those? Do I want to have 3 voices? Do I want to have 2? Do I want to have 5? Do I want to only have 1? Whatever you want to do is completely up to you. But these decisions have to be made before you make your first purchase of a piece of gear. The next question, and probably the biggest one in the what do I want it to do category, is what am I going to do with this modular synthesizer when it's completed? Do I want to use it to perform with, play live? Do I want to use it to do sound design, to create interesting sounds that I then record into my DAW, or that I play with the keyboard into my DAW, or into a recorder that I use in my music production? So basically a sound design tool. Do I want it to be a standard synth? Do I want it to be a single voice that I play with the keyboard and play it just like I would play any other synthesizer, but with my own unique sound? Along with that playability, how will I tell it what I want it to play? Will that be sequencers or sequencers only? Will it be played with a keyboard? Will it be played with a MIDI controller, with drum triggers, with touch pads? However I want to get those commands into this is going to also determine what types of modules and pieces that I'll get. The next dilemma is, do you want this to be something that is relatively static, so it's a synth voice that you will sit down and play? Or do you want it to be something that's tweakable? So basically it will play, or it will run sequences or things like that, and then you can use your hands to twist knobs? Or do you want it to be kind of self-playing, meaning that it has a lot of kind of automated modulation sources like LFOs and things like that that can change up the sound while it plays all by itself, rather than you actually physically changing it yourself? And a whole other category of modules, so therefore something else to think about, is effects. Do you want this to have internal effects? Do you want modules built into your system that handle the effects duties? Or do you want to use outboard effects like guitar pedals and things like that, effects processors that you would then run the signal through? That will again drive a lot of the decisions on what actually goes into the case and takes up the space. And that brings us to the case. All of these things need to fit into whatever size case you decide to get. And cases in modular are measured in 2 different directions. So you have the number of units, rack units, which is a standard 3 rack unit, is basically the size of most modules, although there are 1 unit modules as well. So do you want just a row of 3 rack units? And that would be 3U. Or do you want to have 2 different rows, which would get you to 6U or beyond? And then there are 1U rows that you can add in as well. So you can do 4 or 7. And there are cases that are all made in these standard sizes. The other dimension, and perhaps the most important one, is the width, and that's measured in HP. Each unit is a certain width or a certain number of HP wide, and those will add up to the total width of your case. So keeping in mind, if you have a small case, you may quickly run out of space, but hopefully you'll run out of space before you run out of money. If you have a larger case, you may not as quickly run out of space, but you may more quickly run out of money. So there are some people that say buy the biggest case that you can and then fill it up over time, which is one way to look at it. Some people say to buy a small case and start small, build it out completely, and then once you've gotten into modular and you've realized that it's something that you really like, then look at purchasing another case that's a larger one and perhaps transferring those modules over, or perhaps starting to build out another case for another purpose. Cases also come in all shapes and sizes and form factors and are made out of all types of material. There's even DIY kits where you can just buy the rails that you screw into and a power supply, and you can make your own case out of anything, out of an old suitcase, out of a cardboard box, out of whatever you want to make it out of. But many of the most common cases that you'll see are some combination of wood, metal, plastic, but there are some that are carbon fiber and all sorts of other materials. Keep in mind also there's different types of cases for a rack mount that you're going to keep stationary in a studio setting or in your home or something like that. And there's other ones that are designed to be transportable. So this goes back to that question of what am I going to do with this? Is this going to be a fixture in my studio that I'm going to use for sound design in production, or that I'm going to play just at home? Or is this something that I'm planning on going out and playing shows with, and it needs to be something that has a lid that can be securely fastened to it with the patch still connected, and with a handle and with a durable enough case that it can be moved around without the risk of damaging the modules that are inside. So all of this stuff will determine how you start. All of this stuff will determine the first moves that you make. So prior to doing anything, the very first thing is to ask yourself all of these questions and come up with a roadmap of what you want it to do, why you want it to do that, how you want it to do that, and how you plan on using it. The answer to all of those questions is going to get you started, and it's going to help reduce down the number of options and choices, because when I say there are thousands and thousands of options out there, it's not exaggerating. And a lot of them are small companies you may never have heard about. There's not a lot of information out there about them. They have bizarre names, and it doesn't give you a lot of a clue about what the actual module does or how it does it. There are some YouTube videos that you can watch, but that information is kind of patchy. And so being able to find all of those answers becomes a scavenger hunt on its own. And the only way that you can make that a bit easier is by narrowing down the choices before you get started, so you know at least what type of things you're looking for, so you can rule out some of the others. Now, if some of these questions seem overwhelming and you don't have a really good answer for them, and you're not really sure what you want to make or how you want to make it, a good idea is to kind of look at some of the synthesizers that you may already have, or you may have played, or that you may have seen before, and figure out the ones that you like and what you like about them. Is it the type of oscillator that it has? Is it the type of filter that it has? Is it the type of envelope? Is it the LFOs? What is it about those individual synthesizers? Taking those pieces can then give you kind of a clue about what path to start down about the different modules that you want to get. So for example, if you really like the filters on the Moog Sub 37, you're going to want to look for modules that have that particular type of ladder filter that will give you a similar tone. If you happen to like the filters on Korg MS-20, there are filters that are designed to sound like those type of filters, to act similarly, because they have similar circuitry. So you can mix and match, and you could come up with a really unique oscillator, filter, envelope combination that doesn't exist in any other synthesizer, and you can do that unique to you using a unique combination of these modules once you start to figure out where you want to go. And before we get too far along, I want to give a big shout out to this video's sponsor, and that's Perfect Circuit. Without the great people at Perfect Circuit and their knowledge and their help and their sponsorship of this video, this whole modular journey wouldn't even be possible. If, like me, you don't have a local synth shop, you can look to Perfect Circuit to be your virtual hometown shop. They have an amazing selection of synths, drum machines, recording and pro audio gear, Euro rack modules. They're not a chain, and they ship worldwide from their independent shop in Burbank, California. The team is more than knowledgeable. They're musicians who use this gear regularly, and thanks to their passion for sharing their knowledge, you'll feel right at home. Thanks to the whole team at Perfect Circuit for helping make this video possible. And if you're interested in starting down this path or maybe continuing down the path of modular synthesis and you're looking for any particular gear that you've seen in any of these videos, there's an affiliate link in the video description below, and that will take you to my page at perfectcircuit.com, where you can find a list of all of the gear that I use personally, including all of the modules that you'll see throughout the course of this video series. And if you click on that affiliate link and you do decide to purchase anything on that list or anything else from Perfect Circuit, it is one of the best ways that you can help support the channel. Finally, let's just talk for a minute about my answers to these questions, so that this will be kind of what drives the other videos in this series. So I decided that the modular that I want to build is something that I can play and perform with live. I wanted something that could be played by itself or that could be connected to other gear as part of a larger live setup. I play techno and house music, so I wanted to gear it towards playing techno and house music. And I wanted it to be something that was very playable and improvisational. I didn't want to have a static patch that kind of played itself. I wanted to be able to modify things during a performance and use this as a way to perform live in front of a crowd. The basis of all of this came from something that I heard in an interview somewhere where someone was talking about the dialogue between humans and machines. And I really was inspired by that idea, and the idea that I want my performances to be a live dialogue between human and machine. I want the machine to do certain things as its side of the conversation, and I want to be able to do things that input myself into that conversation as well. So there are things that I wouldn't have done were I just controlling everything myself, and there's things that the machine wouldn't do if it was just doing everything automatically. I wanted it to be very much a back and forth with the crowd and the people that are there enjoying the show being active participants through their response to what's going on. So very much a two-way dialogue rather than a one-way monologue of here's the show, take it or leave it as it is. I wanted it to be something that was organic and that moved and flowed and that was really unique to each performance rather than something that was done exactly the same each time. And because of this, I decided that it was going to be sequenced internally and have an internal mixer. It was going to have a combination of different types of synth voices, so analog and digital and wavetable. And I wanted it to have things like filters that had a lot of character so that they could be really used to shape sound rather than just filtering out frequencies, but they could add something as well like distortion or wave folding or things like that so that it could turn it into something that sounded unique depending on the unique combination of things that I patched together within the case. I also wanted to make sure that I could integrate it or not with my live hardware setup and my Electron machines that I use, as well as an outboard sample player, like I'll be using the 1010 black box in order to allow for a much broader palette of sounds and opportunities to combine them together. I basically took the way I do my live sets, which I've done a bunch of videos here on the channel that you can go check out. I wanted to embody that in a modular synthesizer form. So very much like the groove boxes that I love to mess around with, I wanted something that could play by itself and be freestanding, or it could be connected with others into kind of any size or any type of configuration that I wanted. Another thing that I wanted the modular to be able to do is do some sound design, obviously for the performances, but also for recording and creating loops that I can then use in my hybrid music production workflow. So I use Ableton Live and I use that with a lot of hardware. So what I wanted to be able to do was to create interesting loops and things that I would have never necessarily come up with on my own using the modular, and record those in and save those into files so that when I sit down to produce something new, I'll have a whole set of loops and sounds and patterns and things like that that are my own, that I created, that I can then use to flesh out the tracks that I'm producing within Ableton. So that's it, the kickoff of the modular journey. It's been amazing so far. I've been learning a crazy amount, and I can't wait to share the things that I've learned along the way, because I've found that there's not a ton of information out there. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Just drop them in the comments down below. And if it's something that I know the answer to with my new limited knowledge, I am happy to answer it or help you look it up or help point you in the direction of somebody that can help you and that would know the answer much better than I would. But it's really exciting. I look forward to this. And again, shout out to Perfect Circuit. Thank you very much for sponsoring this video series. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. In the meantime, take care of each other.